Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Film Haven Reviews. I'm your host Sawyer as always, and today we are finishing up our Aspad Spookers theme. It's our last Aspad Spooker, which is really sad. I know Allie's really sad about it because we had such a good time watching these movies and, love a good ghost mystery, ghost murder mystery, which ends up being the kind of sub-theme throughout this theme. It's not just a spooker. They're kind of thing that ties all these movies together is that there is some kind of crime or murder that has taken place, and the ghost is helping out figure out what happened beyond the grave. And it's about interpreting what these ghostly apparitions and these visions are kind of showing the main characters and how they can solve the crime through those visions. So very cool concept in and of itself. And they made some very B-class 7 out of 10 movies. So today we're talking about The Gift from 2000, directed by Sam Raimi. It's a little different movie for him, but he has got a pretty diverse portfolio, so not too different. I'd say it's a little less different than, say, The Quick and the Dead or something. And considering that right after this movie, he makes Spider-Man, the Spider-Man trilogy, very diverse director. But anyway, so it's got a 6.7 user score, which is pretty good, almost a 7. And then we got a 62 Metascore, which is also pretty good for this kind of movie. It's in the green, technically, which is nice. And I think that's pretty much where Stir of Echoes was sitting. I think it's around the same, in the 6s. I don't know where in the 6s, but they're, in the Metascore, it's green, and the users seem to like it pretty good. This is pretty consistent as well, and I'll putting the cart before the horse here, but I'm about to tell you anyway. I gave it a 7 out of 10, so I don't think I'm too far off here as well. And while this movie, 7 out of 10 is maybe not super memorable, just like Gothica or Stir of Echoes, I am grateful because it did inspire me. The setting in this movie is in the Deep South, and I think it's rural Georgia, but kind of probably by the Gulf, I would imagine. It kind of has almost Louisiana vibes. So because of that, it kind of gave me some ideas for the next theme. We'll talk about that at the end of the episode. But let's get into the overview because there's not an incredible amount of things to talk about this movie, but there is some things to point out. So we'll get into it. So like I said, another 7 out of 10. There's as I'll go through this movie, you'll see that there are lots of good things to talk about, but almost all of those good things have a bit of a caveat to them. And because of that, especially when we're just comparing these to our other movies like Gothica and Stir of Echoes, they all kind of fit in the same kind of realm. They're all about the same quality, same amount of entertainment, all that kind of stuff, and they just kind of have strengths and weaknesses between each other. So that's why I just felt right to give it a 7 out of 10. I could maybe see going 7.5 just because I think this is maybe the most competently made movie out of the two, like overall. But that at the same time, Stir of Echoes had higher heights, and so did Gothica. We'll get into that when we get towards the end. But anyway, so one of the things about this movie is that Deep South atmosphere, like I was talking about, being set in this rural Georgia town. That kind of vibe was just really alluring, and it kind of gives you there's something about that that's really comforting. I'm from the South, but I'm not from the Deep South, if that makes sense. And so, although I did grow up in a small town, I didn't grow up in this kind of town, if that makes sense. But there are some kind of parallels, which I guess I'll get into in a little bit. But I did find it oddly comforting, even though there's a lot of bad stuff going on. But they did a good job. I mean, it kind of feels like what's the movie with Kathy Bates, Fried Green Tomatoes. Sorry, I don't know why I couldn't think of that. Kind of has a little bit of Fried Green Tomatoes vibe, and there's like a billion other movies, like the Butterscotch Boys or something. Does anyone remember that movie? It used to be in my grandparents' little hoopty van they had. They had a little VHS player in there with the TV set into it, and Butterscotch Boys and Rear Window were like the two movies that were in there, which is like so random because those two movies could not be farther apart in quality. But anyway. So yeah, I love that Deep South atmosphere, that kind of small town stuff. It kind of invades the narrative and in a good way. There's like kind of that small town feeling is very much tied to what happens in the movie and how it's structured and everything. So I really enjoyed that. The all-star cast, I mean, let's go through the list here because it's pretty crazy, especially for that era, 2000s. Cate Blanchett is the main character, of course. You got Greg Kinnear, Katie Holmes, when was the last time you saw her? Hilary Swank, once again, remember she exists. Keanu Reeves is a bad guy. Like, what? Also, Keanu Reeves, I just realized being in a bit of an ensemble and not being a main character is a little strange. He's usually like at least the main character or close to it. For him to be kind of a bit of a side character, I mean, he is an important character in the movie, but in this ensemble, he's not the main guy. Very interesting, especially considering this movie came out a year after The Matrix. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then, of course, there's also like those classic kind of Raimi does have a lot of people multiple times in his movies. His brother for sure is in the movies a lot. And then, of course, you have Bruce Campbell, who always likes to make a good cameo. Not in this movie, which is interesting. But we have the lady who plays Aunt May has a little bit part in this movie, which is really interesting because once again, Sam Raimi is going to be making Spider-Man in like a year, or he's probably already making it by the time this movie released. And then J.K. Simmons plays like the sheriff or sheriff's deputy or something. So J.K. Simmons in this, and of course he plays the newspaper guy. I'm blanking on his name right now in Spider-Man. There's a bit of foreboding there, which is kind of cool. So it's a good classic ghost mystery with the added angle that the main character is actually like psychic, like that from the beginning. Whereas like in Stir of Echoes, he kind of has some like latent clairvoyant abilities that are kind of bestowed upon him through hypnosis, and he's kind of part of the movie is him wrapping his head around this gift that he has. And in this movie, it's already a foregone conclusion. The main character, Cate Blanchett, she has psychic abilities. That's part of her character, is that she reads tarot and stuff like that. We'll get into that in the narrative, but that is like an interesting angle on it, is that the mystery of the gift or whatever is not actually the mystery of the movie. That part is already solved. It's more about interpreting what she's seeing, and then also kind of just the small town drama, really. I mean, there's a little bit of a courtroom drama here too, which is interesting and kind of fun. That makes it a little different from the other two. But yeah, so there's some cool cinematography and let's just get into the narrative, because we're going to talk about all this in a little bit anyway. So in the narrative, now stick with me because this one's thick. I tried to condense it down, and as we'll talk about later with the story, it's there's a lot going on. So Annabelle Wilson, played by Cate Blanchett, is a widowed single mother of two boys living in a small rural town of deep South Georgia, where she uses her gift, or some would say the gift, to put food on the table as she gives psychic card readings to locals in exchange for donations. After meeting with her son's principal at school, Annabelle receives a grave, morbid vision that later sparks her concern when it is found out that the principal's young fiancée, Jessica, played by Katie Holmes, has turned up missing. So yeah, I just like glazed over so much already, but yeah, it's a small town thing. She does tarot readings for all these people in town, and she's kind of like, I'll talk about this later, but there's like a dichotomy to her, at least in the town's perception, where she's both like a pariah for having these gifts, and a lot of people are skeptical of that, but she's also like a pillar because of that community, because what happens when people are down and out, they're going to go to see her to get her. I don't know if this is real, but read my cards for me, would you? That kind of thing, which is really interesting. And so, yeah, it starts off with her having this vision after a while of this woman that looks wet and maybe dead, like a corpse. And so it's like, well, that's not good. And then there's also this whole side plot where Hilary Swank's character, Valerie, who's a regular customer of Annabelle's, is being abused by her husband, Donnie Barksdale, played by Keanu Reeves. And after Donnie finds out Annabelle's been telling Valerie to leave her husband, he begins harassing her and even threatening Annabelle's life. So yeah, there's this whole section where he just like keeps coming into her home, and like, or she knows it's him, and he's like taking her cards and spelling like Satanist or something. I can't remember what it is, but basically he's like super ultra Christian, even though he's abusing his wife, like physically and emotionally. And also is just a terrible person overall. And, but he's, sticks to his Christian values. And so he thinks that she's like satanic or whatever. And it seems like he genuinely thinks that, which is interesting, because in reality, if you look just like peek a little bit under that subconscious, that you can see that he just has a bone to pick with her, because he doesn't want Annabelle telling his wife to leave him, obviously, because he wants the control. It's a whole thing. But stick with me here, because we're going to bring it all together. The hook comes in about halfway through the movie when Annabelle's vision takes her to a pond on Donnie's property, in which they find Jessica's body, and the police promptly arrest Donnie, and his murder trial begins. So that's like the hook. I don't want to, read too much into that and get too much further than that. But as you can probably tell, if that's halfway through the movie, then there's a lot more story to tell. But it is really interesting because there is some twists and turns, and it's not exactly hard to figure it out. Not even really halfway. I'm sorry, and if this is a spoiler, and you want to watch this movie, it's on. I think if you have Paramount Plus, you can see it on Amazon Prime. So just pause it, but I guess I'll talk a little spoiler free. I'm not going to reveal the big twist at the end, but I will kind of let you know, as I've already alluded, you kind of figure that while Donnie Barksdale is an absolute terrible person, and is a villain of the movie, he is not the person who killed her. There's more to it than that. And there has to be, of course, because otherwise, like, this would be kind of a silly movie. You're just not, if you're intelligent enough at all in movie plots, especially mysteries, and, as I've said ad nauseum, this theme alley is like a superhuman skill for, sussing out these things. This one's pretty obvious that Keanu Reeves is not the bad guy, just because they're hitting so hard that he's the bad guy for the first half, and that's always a good indication that he's not the ultimate bad guy. But anyway, that's the narrative. It's really interesting. There's lots of things I missed, and that's kind of like, I guess the first thing I want to talk about post-narrative here is the story itself, which I'm like the narrative, the story. But as far as aspects of the film that I really want to discuss in this episode, the story is something that I think is maybe the most interesting to talk about, just because it has a lot of elements. It has a lot of different things going on at once. And as I kind of alluded to before, this small town drama is very much kind of infused into that. There's this like whole side plot too with Giovanni Ribisi's character, his name's Buddy Cole, and he's like a very mentally disturbed like guy who works on Cate Blanchett's car. Also, I didn't look this up, but I think it's pretty obvious. The car that Cate Blanchett is driving is definitely the Evil Dead car. That yellow sedan is very classic, and you see it in every single Sam Raimi movie. That's like the only reference, that like the Easter egg that I could see for Raimi movies. Usually there's a few, but there's probably some that I'm missing. But in this one, the most obvious and glaring one is like a very big part of the movie. I mean, she's driving that thing all the time. But yeah, so for you Raimi heads out there, that's the you'll notice that immediately, that there is that yellow car is being reused. But anyway, so Giovanni Ribisi's character Buddy Cole is working on her car, and then like he takes her home, and he has this like whole like psychotic breakdown, and basically she's the only thing, like she's his therapist of sorts. Like he's coming to her for psychic readings, but really it's like, I need help with my mental health. And it's a whole side story. I mean, he does end up being pretty important for the ending of the movie, but at the same time, I do feel like we didn't need all this. There's like so many things. And this is why I'm a little like conflicted about whether I like it or not. Like, I will say that Allie and I were into the movie the whole time. We were locked in. We were paying attention. It wasn't something, I didn't find it too boring or anything. But I will say the meandering nature of the plot is like weirdly both a strength and a weakness of it. It makes the narrative, the story, not as concise, but it also kind of like, it's almost excusable because the fact that the actual story is set in this small town where there's always all this drama. There's always all these characters that are, all around, and people are coming over to her house all the time, and she lets her kids sleep over at the old lady's house across the street. It's just very small town vibes, and that it is kind of a cool thing about the story. But I did like the way that they kind of threaded some of that small town culture into the narrative. And like I was kind of alluding to before, Annabelle is like a great example of that. See, like small towns, they have this ability to kind of like hold two things at once. There's be duplicitous. So, right, like I said, she's the pillar of the community in a way because everyone's going to her with their problems. But at the same time, they're kind of like side-eyeing her, and she's become a pariah because she has this supernatural ability, which seems almost anti-Christian, right? It's like pagan or something. It's crystals and visions of the future, tarot cards, all these things that are kind of have, like in the times past, the satanic panic and stuff like that have been kind of conflated with, I mean, it's American folk magic, which is something that is, it doesn't in our history in the past hasn't really been like too at odds with each other. There's plenty of Christians, especially at the beginning of our country, who practiced all kinds of like folk magic and superstitions and things like that while also going to church on Sundays. Those two things were not mutually exclusive, I guess. And this movie shows that well, because Annabelle, while reading tarot and being very humble about it, truly, because it's just something that she grew up with, she's also going to church on Sunday. I mean, you see it in the movie. She's literally like leaving church in this one scene, which in that scene too, we'll talk about later, but I just love the setting and everything. That main street with the Spanish moss, we'll talk about it later. But it just shows how like small towns, there's a lot of that in small towns where you have people that are against something, but at the same time, they like, because I guess people are so close with each other, they also embrace them as well. Like, for example, like I've heard of before like gay marriage was legal and all this kind of stuff. And like, you know, this small town, rural America, definitely it took a while, and still in places it's still not acceptable to be gay and stuff like that, or they don't like that socially. But then there's also like Tony, who is everyone's favorite person at the bar, and he's obviously gay, but they accept him because they know him, they grew up with him. And I guess that's like kind of what I'm getting at with this small town vibe, is that yes, she is from the small town. So while they may side-eye her a little bit on her powers, they kind of also embrace them a little bit, because they're like, well, I know her. I know that she's not a liar. And so that's kind of what I mean. I like the way that this story plays with that, while also it feels very authentic to small town America, so all that to say, that's a good thing about the story. While the pacing and sound, it spreads itself too thin in a lot of places. There's even characters that I'm not even, like the whole J.K. Simmons, the whole police department, all of them are characters. You got like a lawyer over here, and you've got the court. There's like courtroom drama, so there's all these characters too. It's just kind of like too much a little bit. But I did like it though. So overall, the story is good. It's just like we're going to be getting into with everything I talk about. There's like little caveats. So the next thing I want to talk about is the scares and the cinematography for you. We're going to have to put that together because they kind of go hand in hand. Some of the most creative parts with the editing and the cinematography come in the scares. And so otherwise, the movie is pretty just like standard cinematography. I mean, usually I like to talk about it a little bit if it's interesting. And there were some cool shots, like I said, that main street, which is a little bit more the setting, but that main street area is cool with the Spanish moss and the trees. It really has a cool aesthetic. And then also there's like a cool scene outside of a party where Cate Blanchett and Greg Kinnear are talking, and like the moon's out, and there's like a fireplace in the background, and they're all, or like a fire going, and everyone's kind of talking in the background. It's just like a nice kind of cozy little scene, little stuff like that. But that's not so much the cinematography as it is the setting and kind of knowing what to put like in front of the camera rather than how to use the camera. But yeah, then there's like all these dream sequences. There's a few. Most notably, I'd say like the bathtub scene. That one's pretty good. And then there's one where she's walking down, when she's having that vision to get to where she finds out that the body's in the pond. She's like walking down that main street again, and that's just kind of a cool scene. And then there's probably the weirdest one is when she's out like her dog is like barking or whatever. She goes out to the dog house, and then she looks up, and in the tree is like, you know, Katie Holmes' character like floating and kind of like she's in underwater, but up above her, suspended above her. So that was like kind of a cool element. I don't know if the special effects or the visual effects were super great there. I can't remember, but I almost want to say that it wasn't like amazing, but it is like a cool concept. So like I said, the most creative editing and stuff is all around the scares, but on the scares themselves, they're not super spooky. The bathtub scene was like, the buildup was pretty good, but the payoff wasn't amazing. But I will say that it was spooky. The vibes were very spooky, even if they weren't like scary, if that makes sense. So it's kind of interesting thinking about Sam Raimi, this kind of master of horror, making movies like Evil Dead or even like Drag Me to Hell or something like that. those movies are, while a little silly, they are like heavy on the horror. And in this one, it's a little bit more just spooky. So I thought it was interesting that Sam Raimi would kind of tone it down a little bit for this film. But if you think about the film as a whole, it's not really for that. The spookiness is not at the forefront of the movie's, I don't know if message is the right word. These kind of movies don't really have much of a message, but like at the forefront of the experience. This is more about a small town and specifically a small town woman who is trying to deal with both her town and the characters within it, and also reconciling with her special gift that she has and her responsibility to use it. So it's not really about the spookiness. The last thing I want to talk about before we kind of wrap things up here, because there's really not too much to say. I mean, I've kind of touched on a lot of it. The things that make this movie unique is Keanu Reeves is crazy, man. This character he's made, I was so surprised. I forgot he was even in the movie. And so when he shows up, he's this abusive husband, and he's like, I forget how tall he is. He's really tall, and you could tell in the movie, and with his big, he's like, got his beard, his trucker hat. He's very ominous and just like kind of like he seems dumb, but at the same time recklessly so. Like, just it's one of those things where there's like, okay, for example, there's a scene where he just like rushes into Annabelle's house and just like causes a ruckus, takes his wife Hilary Swank and just like throws her out of the room, out of the house, and then sticks her in the truck and drives off. And it's like, if he's willing to publicly abuse his wife, like this is out in the middle of the street, in the middle of the town. If he's willing to do that, then like he's showing that he's a force to be reckoned with. And so when he starts to turn his aggression onto Cate Blanchett, you kind of like, as an audience member, you get that sense of like, oh man, like he means business. Like when he's threatening your life, that means he may just kill you. Like that may just happen. And for an actor who is maybe not known, he's obviously a legacy actor. He's been acting since the 80s. He's been around for a long time, and he's in some of the most iconic franchises, The Matrix, John Wick. But he's not known for his like incredible acting chops, right? Like he plays the straight, like kind of like John Wick is like made for him, even though it's not. It's like hilarious. Like it's not good acting, but he's doing it on purpose in a way, right? Like where he's just like, I'm gonna need a gun.
Guns. Lots of guns.
And it's like, yeah, okay. He's a character. It's funny. It's like kind of ironic, but also not. Like you can unironically, but also ironically enjoy his acting, especially in that movie. But I'm not the only one who sees this. If you look at a lot of his other movies, I watched Speed a couple years ago again, and I was like, yeah, the acting was pretty sus there. But it's just because he's so SoCal. It's just like, I don't know. Anyway, seeing him in this movie, he showed some range. He really showed that he can emote in an aggressive way, because he's usually not the bad guy. The only other movie I could think of where he's the bad guy is the Man of Tai Chi. And in that movie, once again, he's a very stiff character. And that's kind of where he does a good job. I mean, The Matrix is a good example of that, being Neo, being the stoic but confused chosen one. It's like, it's a good role for him. But this was a totally different film. And I really enjoyed the way that he portrayed this character. It was convincing. I was scared of him despite being Keanu Reeves. He was like ominous and foreboding. So good job, Keanu Reeves, man. I love it. Anyway, but in conclusion, there isn't too much, like I said, to talk about this movie, especially since it hits on so many other things that we've talked about in this theme. You know, it's just it's a ghost spooker. It's an Aspad spooker. And that's like, if you have been listening to these other two episodes, if you've been watching these other two episodes, I forgot to plug watching the episode, go on YouTube or Spotify if you want to watch these episodes. But anyway, if you've been watching or listening to these last two episodes, then you already kind of know what you're into a little bit here. The vibes are a little different. Just think about Gothica or Stir of Echoes, but in small town, rural Georgia, and then you'll kind of get the vibe. So putting it all together, I mean, the narrative is strong and interesting, if not a little weak on the pacing and the direction. The acting is good. We got all these big name actors in here, but sometimes the accents are a little iffy, of course. Cate Blanchett, who's famously like a British lady. I mean, putting her as like a Georgian accent is just, She did good, okay? Acting wise, she did good. But I definitely, especially, it took some getting used to. At the beginning of the movie, I was like, oh, what is this? But by like 20 minutes in, I'm already like, I've forgotten about it, and they're just their characters. So that's good acting, despite some bad accents. And then, it was, the twist was good. The twist was fine. But like Gothica, you kind of saw it coming. And, for a 2-hour movie, like I said, Allie and I were we were watching it. So that's really good. We were engaged. We were not, it's longer, definitely, than the other two, because it is a little bit more of a quote unquote epic story. But that length is also due to the meandering storyline, which is kind of what I was talking about earlier. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag in that way too. So like, it's not as scary as Stir of Echoes, but it probably has the best story of either. So that's good. It's not as aesthetically pleasing as Gothica, but overall, it's the most competently written. Like, Gothica's problem was that the logic in the script didn't make too much sense a lot of times, whereas this movie, it all made sense. Nothing about it didn't make sense. I wasn't like, wait, how does that work? Like, that wasn't a question. And Stir of Echoes even maybe had like a 1 or 2 parts of that too, where it's like, right, one of my issues with Stir of Echoes was the dynamic between the wife and the husband, and I'm like, this is not good script writing a little bit here. This movie had a good script in that way. Could it have been more concise? Could the director, Sam Raimi, could he have kind of streamlined it a little bit to be a little bit more effective and taking it down to at least like an hour 45? Like, yeah, probably. But it is the most competently made out of the two. So that's why I think 7 out of 10 makes sense. Like, it's not as scary as Stir of Echoes. It's not as aesthetically pleasing as Gothica, but overall, it's kind of like a little bit better than both. So I think in the end, it all comes out to 7 out of 10. Makes sense to me. They're all just solid B-class spookers. I mean, there are better versions of these movies out there, of course. But if you've already watched those and you want to watch something like this, then, I mean, I can't recommend them enough. So I really enjoyed this theme a lot. I'm going to miss it a little bit. I'm going to miss it so bad that I kind of don't want it to end. And that is why this next thing that we're going to be doing starting next week is going to be Deep South horror. So this movie obviously inspired me a little bit to I was like, oh man, I do love a good like horror movie set in like the Deep South, right? And it's very similar to one of the first themes we did on the podcast, which was backwoods horror, right? Those things are kind of go hand in hand a little bit. There may even be some overlap, but the idea is still the same, where it's just that Deep South aesthetic is just really fun. And a lot of times, even if they're not period pieces, they kind of feel like them, because a lot of the buildings and even the trees and like the environments and maybe even the culture of some of these towns, they feel antiquated. And so like one of the movies we're going to be talking about, which I'm not going to reveal yet, the movie may take place in modern times for when the movie was being made, but there's all this history just kind of like sitting around. And so I do think that that's like one of the reasons why the Deep South horror is kind of alluring, because history, especially when you're looking at ghost stories, because a lot of these movies are probably going to be, at least one of them is a ghost spooker. And there's going to be some kind of supernatural element. So it's like Deep South horror with that supernatural element. You could almost call it like Aspad Spooker adjacent. So I think this is almost like a part 1 and 2 theme in my view, especially since like coming from the Gift into this theme, it totally makes sense. So anyway, I'm very excited for that. So we'll get into it. Be looking for the new episode next week. And I hope you guys have a great week this week, and I will see you next Friday.